We'll do a quick review of last time before we jump into the new material for this week. And I don't think there is actually any new material for this week. It's just we're exploring the material we've already done a little more in depth. And so what we have here is we have our void setup and void draw. We know that these are functions that are void functions, meaning they don't return anything. Void draw, when I say it's invoked 60 times a second, it's like some other file somewhere is calling draw 60 times a second, right? Which is our 60 frames per second, okay? And draw, each time through draw, gives us 1 frame, right? By the time we get to the ending curly brace of draw, we have 1 frame on the screen drawn. And then, you know, 1/60th of a second later, we're back in draw and we're drawing the next thing. All right, so pretty cool so far, right? And we talked about classless functions last time. So if a function is in a class, we call it a member function or a method. When it's outside of a class, it's just a classless function. It can be a function and you can pass it in. And some of you were weirded out by that, saying, we've never really done this before. The closest thing you can get to that in Java is a static function in main. All right, so static means that you don't need an object of the class to use it. All right, and so it belongs to the class itself. We say it binds to the class instead of binding to an object. We'll talk about that in a second, but in a subsequent video. But what that means is that if you wanted to make a function, just a general function in your main class, you could say something like static in front of it, and then you could do whatever you wanted, and you could call that function whenever without having to worry about, wherever in main, without having to worry about actually having an object of the main class, which you typically wouldn't have in Java. That sounds confusing, it's because it is, and that's one of the reasons people just roll their eyes at Java. But we can go into it so you can understand it a little more. Right now, what I just want you to know is that we can do in processing classless functions, and I'm going to put that in quotes a little bit. People might take issue with that, calling these classless functions, but I think they're pretty much a facsimile of classless functions. They're functions that do not belong to a class that we can see, right? Any class that we can see, okay? And so let's create a classless function. And it's the same way we create methods, okay? So functions, methods, member functions, if they're in a class or not within a class, it really is no different when we create these functions. So I can create like a function called add to nums, let's say, and I know this is a really dumb function that makes no sense and has no bearing on anything, but it's good to just kind of see the mechanics of how we create a function. We start with the return value, and remember the return value when we invoke this function tells us what this function will evaluate to. And we'll invoke it in a second, so we'll come back to the return value. This is the name of the function. That's how we invoke the function, okay? We have 2 parameters, and that means to make this function work, we have to provide 2 integer values in this case. One that will set num1's value, and the second one that'll set num2's value. So num1 and num2 have different values every time this function is invoked, okay? Can have any different values, and as long as they're integers, it's all good. What this function will do is it will add num1 to num2 and return that value. Awesome, all right? And so if we have void setup, we can have this situation where we call this function. So we could say add to nums, right, with 4 and 5, and what this will do is it will it'll make num1 equal to 4 and num2 equal to 5, for this particular run of the function. So it's like we're saying num1 equals 4, num2 equals 5, and it'll return num1 plus num2, okay? And we can set that equal to any kind of integer. We can do whatever we want with this. We can pretend this is going to evaluate to an integer value because that's what it returns. And since it's evaluating to an integer value, whatever we would do with an integer value, we can do with this. So notice it's on the right-hand side of the assignment operator, right? And we've set an int, so one of our variables, you know, we have a box in memory which is labeled x, and we have set its value, so we've stuffed inside its value the number 9 at this point, right? And we could do the same. We could say int y equals add two nums 13 and 14, and that'll give us the number 27, okay? And y will equal 27. For that particular run of the function, num1 will equal 13, and num2 will equal 14, and then y will equal 27, okay? So we name these things whatever we want, but they can be used for the run of the function for evaluation, and then once we create the function, we can do whatever, all right? We return when we're returning a value, okay? And return ends the function, okay? So it ends the function no matter what. You can have the term return in a void function, but you can't actually return a value. So in a void function, I could return, I could create, actually, I don't know if you should be returning from, I don't know if you can should return from setup prematurely. I don't know what that implies in processing. So I'll just make another void function. Draw circle, right? And what you could do is you could have a situation where you draw this circle and it takes in a diameter. Okay, that's an integer. But if the diameter is less than 0, we might return. Okay, so notice I'm not returning a value. I'm just returning prematurely if someone passes in a diameter that we couldn't possibly. There's no such thing as a negative diameter in a circle, right? And so we can return prematurely from a void function. And if we don't return, maybe we draw this thing with ellipse, I don't know, center. So width over 2, height over 2, 30, 30 or something like that. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Diameter, 30, 30. I just make up a number. Okay. So we have two functions here, right? One that adds two numbers together and one that prints an ellipse given that diameter is less than 0. This one returns, it's given that diameter is greater than 0. This one returns num1 plus num2. This one checks if diameter is less than 0 and returns prematurely. Otherwise, if diameter is equal to 0 or greater than 0, it will draw the ellipse, right? And yeah, that's about it. So classless functions, we can invoke these any way we want. We could say draw circle. Maybe I should invoke this so you know what's going on. Wait, 15 is kind of a small circle, right? Let's make it 40. Actually, in this screen, it'll be, the resolution of the screen's a little crazy, so maybe 45 would be better. I don't know. What do we do, kids? Something like that. Yay, right. That's what I was talking about. It's small. It's small. So we're going to make everything big in this particular lecture. Hopefully that makes sense. A few review questions, and then we'll review a little class stuff, including some of the key terms we learned last time.